Okay, it hasn't hit me, but it's.
See, it ain't hit her that Caitlin Clark's on her team yet. Like, damn, I'm still mad from college, but she's right here. She's right there. And she's on your team now. So whatever it may be, it needs to hit you quick, fast, and in a hurry, bruh, because you're looking real spooky in the news, Raven Johnson. You is, bruh.
Pay attention to what just happened there. The reporter asked a simple question about whether it's hit her yet that she's in the WNBA, playing alongside Caitlin Clark. And Raven Johnson's answer? It has hit me, but it hasn't. That's not nervousness. That's someone who's still mentally stuck in the South Carolina versus Iowa rivalry. And the Indiana Fever organization clearly saw the same red flag because they made a decision that tells you everything about how concerned they are.
To this. Like it hit me. I don't know how to explain it. Like I'm in the middle. I'm kind of like just going with the flow. Kind of just being myself. Just always smiling, bubbly, always making people laugh, which I do that. I do a great job of that. So I think I'm in the middle.
Does it help having a couple other former South Carolina players on this roster to kind of help ease in and ease that transition?
Yeah, it has helped. I think other people too. Sophie Cunningham, Caitlin Clark, Lacey Hall, Kelsey Mitchell. They all great people to be around. They help me know things. They know the system really well. So I asked them a lot of questions yesterday. I don't know. They probably got annoyed by me, but I did ask them a lot of questions yesterday.
There it is again. I'm kind of just being myself, which is always smiling, lovely, always making people laugh. But here's the problem with that answer. Being yourself worked at South Carolina, where Dawn Staley built a culture around defending their program against Caitlin Clark and Iowa. That's not going to work in Indiana, because the Indiana Fever didn't draft Raven Johnson to be South Carolina Raven Johnson. They drafted her to complement the player she spent 2 years treating like a rival. And right now, based on what we're seeing in these interviews, that transition hasn't happened yet. The Fever's media team clearly recognized this was becoming a problem because, according to the Indy Star, they actively prevented reporters from asking Raven Johnson about her relationship with Caitlin Clark during this media availability. That's not standard procedure. Teams don't typically block specific questions unless they're worried about the answer.
Yeah, my defense tenacity. I'm like a gnat on the ball. Every time when I get the defense, I want to be the person to turn people over and get my teammates extra possessions to shoot the ball or whatever that may be. But yeah, when it comes to defense, I think that's what I thrive in, which is getting defensive stops.
Best piece of advice so far?
Don't get too high with the highs, and I say this a lot actually. Don't get too high with the highs and don't get too low with the lows. Just be yourself.
Now watch this exchange carefully. When asked how South Carolina prepared her for the professional level, Raven talks about pro habits, intensity, physicality, all good answers. But notice what's missing. There's no acknowledgement that she's now playing with someone who just had the greatest individual season in women's college basketball history. No mention of learning from Caitlin's preparation or work ethic. It's all about what Dawn Staley taught her at South Carolina. Compare that to how Lexi Hull handled her media availability the same day. Hull specifically mentioned Caitlin Clark by name, talked about the talent on the roster, discussed how everyone's working together. That's what a veteran teammate sounds like. Raven's answers sound like someone who's still processing the fact that her college rival is now her point guard.
Johnson. That means shake Caitlin Clark's hand, pass her the ball, do teammate things. I don't want you to be yourself. No, don't do that. Because you being yourself tells me you're not ready for this transition. This is going to be a very, very important transition, not only for your career, but for your basketball situation on the court. Because if you can't fulfill certain duties on the court, ain't no team going to want you, bro. So you need not be yourself.
South Carolina set you up for this, given how it's almost at a pro.
Here's where it gets more complicated. The commentator watching this interview makes a critical point that the Fever organization needs to hear. Don't be yourself, Raven. Don't be South Carolina Raven Johnson. We want you to be Indiana Fever Raven Johnson. That's not just commentary. That's identifying the core issue. Raven Johnson was drafted 15th overall in the 2025 WNBA draft by a team that went to the playoffs last season and has championship aspirations. The Fever don't need another defensive specialist who's still mentally fighting battles from college. They need someone who can defend at an elite level while fitting into a system built around Caitlin Clark's playmaking. And the clock is ticking on that adjustment. Training camp isn't a 3-month process. It's a matter of weeks before the regular season starts, and roster spots aren't guaranteed just because you are a lottery pick. The Fever kept Lexi Hull, Kelsey Mitchell, and Aaliyah Boston because they proved they could play winning basketball together. Raven needs to prove the same thing, and these interviews suggest she's not there yet mentally.
Staley used to tell us to come in with pro habits, and I think, seeing training camp yesterday, I was like, this is how we practice. Like, it's fast-paced, it's very physical. They did a lot of things, and every drill is intense. Like, you got to go at 100 miles per hour, so I think that's what Coach Staley helped us when it came to college. But just bringing your pro habits, even it's days that you probably don't even want to be here, and you might be yourself, but, I mean, you have teammates who uplift you and who hold you accountable to things. So I think pro habits and leaning on your teammates a lot.
Do you have any inclination that the Fever were interested or would draft you? Did you have any of that going into drafting?
Well, I was like in the air. I didn't know what team was going to draft me. Like I talked to a lot of teams on Zooms. We had really good talks, but I was definitely in the air. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know who.
Listen to how she describes her role. My defensive tenacity. I'm like a gnat on the ball. Every time I get on defense, I want to be the person to turn people over and get my teammates extra possessions. On paper, that sounds perfect. The Fever finished 11th in defensive rating last season and desperately needed perimeter defense. But there's a disconnect between what Raven's saying and what the Fever actually need from her. Indiana doesn't just need someone who can get steals. They need someone who can defend without fouling, rotate properly in pick-and-roll coverage, and most importantly, understand that their offensive system runs through Caitlin Clark. That means being in the right spots on offense, making the right cuts, and not standing around watching. The South Carolina system was built on physicality and defensive intensity, which is valuable, but it was also built on a very different offensive philosophy than what Stephanie White runs in Indiana. At South Carolina, the offense was designed to prove they didn't need a superstar point guard. In Indiana, the offense is designed to maximize a generational playmaker. Those are fundamentally different approaches, and Raven's answers suggest she hasn't fully grasped that distinction yet.
Oh, Aaliyah Boston.
That's what I'm saying. We just watch you go to bigs.
Yeah, I got to get my weight up a little bit. She's pretty strong, but whatever the coach needs me to do, I'll do that.
So, as you guys can see here, once again, the Indiana Fever
Feels similar to
did not allow her. I think this Scots. I don't want to play Scots. No, this is actually from the Indy Star. So the Indiana Fever did not allow her to earn.
Now we get to the moment that reveals just how aware the Fever organization is of this problem. When a reporter asks if it's helped having other former South Carolina players on the roster, Raven starts to answer, but then she pivots. Yeah, it has helped. I think other people too, Sophie Cunningham, Caitlin Clark, Lexi Hull, Kelsey Mitchell, they all got great people to be around. Notice the order. She mentions Caitlin Clark third, after Sophie Cunningham. That might seem like a minor detail, but it's actually revealing. When players talk about their new teammates, they typically mention the stars first, or the players they're most excited to learn from. Raven mentions the South Carolina connection first, then fills in other names almost as an afterthought. Compare that to how rookies typically talk about joining teams with established stars. When Victor Wembanyama was drafted, every answer included references to learning from veterans and fitting into the Spurs system. When Caitlin Clark herself was drafted, she immediately talked about learning from Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston. That's the standard rookie approach. Show respect for the established culture and express eagerness to learn. Raven's answers don't have that energy. They have the energy of someone who's still figuring out whether she even wants to be in this situation.
And building with this group.
What is it about Indy that you've enjoyed so much that's made it feel like home for you?
I mean, the fans are great. They, from the moment I got here my rookie year, even though we didn't have the best year on the court, they welcomed me with open arms. Someone from the West Coast didn't have a lot of people here, didn't have anyone here really that I knew. They made this place feel like home, and it's just continued to feel more and more like home the last few years.
Obviously, last year was a little bit weird with all the injuries and things like that. You kind of take over the team from last year that applies to this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think like at the end of the day, we built together so much chemistry. We were together through all the adversity, and I think from top to bottom, everyone stayed ready. And I think that's the sentiment that we all have moving forward. It's like, you don't know when your number is going to be called, but we believe in you when it does. And I think that's just something all of us are taking forward into this season.
Aaliyah came in yesterday and she talked about being whole again, with
Lexi Hull's interview from the same media day provides the perfect contrast. Listen to how she talks about the team. The fans are great. They welcomed me with open arms. Someone from the West Coast didn't have a lot of people here. Didn't have anyone here really that I knew. They made this place feel like home. That's a veteran who's bought into the organization and the city. Hull talks about re-signing with Indiana as an easy decision because of the momentum they built last season, the chemistry they developed, and the potential she sees in this roster. She specifically mentions being excited about having Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark healthy and ready to go. Hull also addresses the defensive emphasis for this season, which is exactly what Raven Johnson was supposedly drafted to help with. But Hull frames it as a team goal, something they're all working toward together. We didn't finish where we wanted to in the defensive rating last year within the league, and we're hoping to build up and get to the top of that leaderboard, both on the defensive side and on the offensive side. That's the kind of answer that shows a player understands the team's goals and sees her role within the larger system. Raven's answers, by contrast, focus on individual defensive intensity without acknowledging how that fits into what the Fever are trying to build.
It's huge for us, and they all bring a lot of energy, a lot of leadership and experience, and it's so great. I mean, we had them last year. They were vocal on the sidelines doing what they could, but when they're out on the court, it makes a difference. It makes a difference in the locker room, makes a difference when we're playing. So we're just really lucky, really excited to be back to full force and excited to see what we can accomplish.
Feels like there's a renewed defensive spirit this year, especially with the personnel too. How much does that kind of excite you, given the fact how much you lean on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, defense wins championships. That's always been what my coaches have said through my entire career, and I think to have that be kind of our foundation and build off of that, I think that's going to help us with a lot of success. We didn't finish where we wanted to in the defensive rating last year within the league, and hoping to build up and get to the top of that leaderboard, both on the defensive side and the offensive side. And I think it goes hand in hand. When one works, they both do.
To go back to the Master, can you just describe kind of what that?
So you guys can check out the full interview on Indy Star, man. That was Lexi Hall and Raven Johnson, man. But they gonna have to clear the air with this Caitlin Clark and Raven Johnson relationship, bro. We gonna need to know something. Till next time, man. Shake the haters off.
So here's what this all means for the Indiana Fever and for Raven Johnson's future with the team. The Fever made a calculated decision to use the 15th pick on a defensive specialist from South Carolina, knowing full well the history between that program and Caitlin Clark. They believed Raven's defensive skills were worth the risk of potential chemistry issues. But chemistry issues in professional sports aren't like chemistry issues in college. In college, you can rely on program loyalty and coaching authority to force players to coexist. In the WNBA, with a 12-player roster and limited practice time, teams need immediate cohesion. The Fever went 20-20 last season and made the playoffs for the first time since 2016. They're not in a position to spend months hoping a rookie figures out how to let go of college rivalries. The fact that the Fever's media team blocked questions about Raven's relationship with Caitlin tells you they're aware this is a problem. But blocking questions doesn't solve the underlying issue. At some point, Raven Johnson needs to demonstrate on the court that she can be a professional teammate to Caitlin Clark. That means making the extra pass, being in the right spots offensively, celebrating Caitlin's success, and showing the same defensive intensity against opponents that she used to show against Iowa. If Raven can make that adjustment, she could be exactly what the Fever need. A versatile defender who can guard multiple positions, create turnovers, and fit into Stephanie White's system without needing the ball in her hands. South Carolina's program does produce pros who understand defensive principles and team concepts, but if she can't make that adjustment quickly, the Fever have other options. They kept veterans like Erica Wheeler and Lexi Hull precisely because those players have proven they can contribute to winning basketball without drama. And with the WNBA expanding and more roster spots opening up across the league, teams aren't going to be patient with players who bring baggage. The commentator watching this interview said it perfectly. You need not be yourself, Raven. Don't be South Carolina Raven Johnson. We want you to be Indiana Fever Raven Johnson. That's not asking her to change her personality or abandon her defensive identity. It's asking her to recognize that she's on a different team now, with different goals and a different superstar to build around. Dawn Staley built an incredible program at South Carolina, and Raven Johnson was a key part of 2 national championship teams. That's an achievement worth being proud of, but professional basketball is about what you can do moving forward, not what you accomplished in college. And right now, based on these interviews, Raven Johnson sounds like someone who's still living in the past. The Indiana Fever need her to live in the present. They need a defender who can help them compete for a championship. They need a teammate who celebrates Caitlin Clark's success instead of tolerating it. And they need someone who understands that being drafted to this team was an opportunity, not a punishment. So the question for Raven Johnson is simple. Can you make that mental shift before the regular season starts? Because if you can't, there are plenty of other players who would love to have your roster spot. Players who don't need to be convinced that playing alongside one of the best point guards in basketball is actually a good thing. The Fever gave you a chance. Now it's on you to prove you deserve it. And based on what we saw in these interviews, you've got work to do. Not on your defensive skills or your athleticism, on your mindset, because right now you sound like someone who's still playing for South Carolina, and that's not going to cut it in Indiana.